Hello, this is Brother Gerald, YouTube philosopher, and today we're going to talk about honor and dishonor. And one of the things that I see here in America is so many of us want to say that we're adults and we're grown, but then we want to cry ignorance, or we want to cry foul when things don't work out, but then we shapeshift. And when I say shapeshift, we change our position instead of holding our position and actually staying in that position long enough to just see how dumb we truly were. Now, I had a discussion with a woman, and one thing I'm going to say is that women have a tendency of changing their position in order to not acknowledge the wrongness of what they've done or the wrongness of a particular attitude or way of thinking. And I would say that the feminist movement is one of these movements that, to me, has placed the woman in a condition of doing what comes natural and not really counting the cost of the consequence. Now, what I'm going to say is that we live in a world that we had nothing to do with in the establishment of natural law and natural principles. But somehow, in growing up, we are exposed to different ways of thinking and different views of this world. And many of these views will obviously manifest themselves in where we actually live these things out directly. We get a taste of pleasure, we get a taste of enjoyment, but in tasting life in the manner that this particular philosophy allows us to taste it, ultimately leaves us empty and lacking and suffering. And then it's at a point where we want to cry out to God. And then God gives us a modicum of reconciliation, a modicum of resolution, a modicum of it's okay. He gives us a little mercy. And in receiving this mercy, we don't even understand that in receiving this modicum of mercy, that God is not winking at your foolishness. He's basically trying to show you that in doing the stupid thing that you did, He didn't kill you. He didn't destroy you. And the destruction would have been more of a lesson not for you, but for those around you. But now here it is. You're enjoying a modicum of mercy, but you're not willing to acknowledge the fact that what you experienced and what you did really was a bad thing. And the messed up thing about it is it would have been better for you to die, because in dying, the people would have been able to easily see that, oh my goodness, that's not the lifestyle that I would like to live. And this is the point that I'm trying to get women to see, because here it was, God has been good to me. He's been so good to me that He has spared my life in making some of the dumbest decisions that I ever made. And the biggest problem in making these decisions is that all of the forecasting was hidden in his word, and all I had to do was take that book, open it up, and read it in preparations for growing up to be a man. And so I'm going to basically look at one particular situation where Moses is giving the Hebrews the law, and it's a long list and breakdown of things, but it talks about property and how if a man has been given custody of property of his neighbor and something happens to his neighbor's property, there's so many different circumstances whereupon which God is carefully examining the process and procedure, and then in certain conditions the person who was given charge and custody over the property has to make restitution, and it would be based on an investigation. Like if I were to give someone custody and care over some property of mine, like say a tool, and in the care and custody of that tool, my neighbor ends up losing the tool. Well, if there was an investigation that showed that the neighbor had put the tool in the car and he failed to lock the car and secure the equipment, and the equipment becomes stolen, then the person to whom was given care of that property, he now becomes liable for making restitution. But if it turns out that, it was in the trunk and the trunk was locked, and here it was, the car gets stolen and the trunk is broken into in order to access the trunk, and the investigation proves that out, then the person who was given charge over that equipment, he's not liable. And then there was another situation where if a man entices a maiden, and a maiden is a woman who's not his wife, but he seduces her, then basically they're saying that that man is to be considered that woman's husband. But here in our society, we see this has become a custom that we call dating. For a man to take a woman out on a date, it's gotten so guttered, it's gotten so perverted that we think that if a woman doesn't put out on the first date, then she's like not really a good woman, because a good woman, if she sees a man and she likes the man, then there's really no reason whatsoever that she should not have sex, especially if he's treating her to dinner. I've taken you out, I've fed you, I've done all of these things, and here it is, you're raping me, woman. You're raping my money. But here it is now, on the flip side, if I decide I don't want to take you out on a date and you get all offended, well, I'm not going to allow you to rape my money or rape my pocket. To me, it's become a perverted kind of thing. And the whole thing is, we don't see the true value of our penises, and we don't recognize the true value of the vagina as representative of intimacy, and not just a means to an end where you're just sexually gratifying yourself. And so it gets to a point where women will say that as a young woman, I wanted to have fun. I wasn't ready to settle down. And so I'm going to forfeit my most productive years in having children, my most productive years in being able to physically attract a man to desire me beyond just the physicalness of this general attractiveness. I'm going to forfeit all of that to have fun. And I'm going to have fun in, encountering all of these different men. And if I want to have sex with them, whose business is it that I allow myself to partake and do that? Well, the thing is, Jesus tells a story in the New Testament where for a man to build a house, if he doesn't take into account the full cost to complete the project, for that man who undertakes the building project and he's unable to complete the project, he runs out of money, then basically his neighbors will look upon him as being a very foolish man because he didn't count the full cost. So in this video, I want women to understand this. Yes, you are free to make choices. But one of the things that you guys aren't paying attention to is that as time goes forward, your beauty is going to diminish and your desirability is going to go as well. And you didn't have any choice in that young men and older men will be more desiring of a younger woman to be with. And if you are willing to forfeit your life's prime energy on having fun, there should be no reason why those subsequent generations of women should be willing to do the same. And they're going to, and ultimately, when you no longer become the desirable woman that you were back when you were younger, there's nothing to prevent men from turning their gaze away from you to go deal with these younger women. And so ultimately, you're going to maybe want to desire to settle down because you see that men are no longer showing as much interest in you as you want. But it's not for you to rationalize and say, well, just because I see all these other people getting married, does it mean that I have to be married? Well, no, it doesn't. But for you to even open your mouth to ask that question is really begging the question, and you're really telling me at a certain point on a certain level that you really want that intimate relationship with the man, where it's no longer just a revolving door of men coming in and coming out, because eventually the revolving door of men coming in and coming out gets cut off. And it's not by you psychologically choosing to cut it off. It's cut off by virtue of you becoming an older, unattractive woman. So this is the one factor that you had no control over. This is one factor that is readily understood and available for all to see and understand. But if you choose to ignore it on account of you getting all of this wonderful attention, it's at your peril. It's not at anybody else's peril. And then if God should see fit to show you mercy and basically says, okay, you made a dumb mistake and you're able to acknowledge it, but you're not able to do anything beyond acknowledging. You have to be able to go back and tell those other younger generations just how foolish you were and what you need to do as younger women to avoid falling into the same ditch as I have. And this is what I don't see enough older women in the church doing. And shame on us for not telling our sons the value and the real value of being intimate with a woman. So this is one of the problems I see with the feminist movement, the women's liberation movement, is that they're not counting the full cost. And ultimately, you guys, the feminists, people are turning women into objects. But the very reason why the feminist movement got started was to keep women from being property, being viewed as property in marriage, because it was a diminishing of their value. But here it was, you guys are really diminished in value because you're not even able to get access to a relationship comparable to marriage where you have a husband that belongs to you, that cherishes you and values you, and you're not in a mental state to be cherished and valued as a wife because you've spent all of your value and resources on not being a cherished and valued woman. So with that, I hope this video gets women to think clearly, and get that blessing. And what I'm saying is, the real blessing is understanding that God made this world to operate on particular rules. And you choose to ignore certain rules, it's at your peril. And if you choose to acknowledge these things, you'll get a blessing. So with that, I depart. Peace to you all.